Imagine the rush of cracking a stone and feeling a blade appear, the same thrill that coursed through the veins of hunters 20,000 years ago. In the next 9 minutes, you'll turn a rock you find on the forest floor into a hunting knife and a piece of bone into a sewing needle, using nothing but what nature offers. Welcome back to Untamed Heritage, where we step out of the modern world and into the raw, hands-on experience of our ancestors. I'm excited to show you why primitive toolmaking matters. It ties us to the people who first shaped stone, it builds confidence and self-reliance, and it fuels the maker spirit that lives in all of us. By the end of this episode, you'll hold two functional tools in your hands and feel the same pride our forebears felt when they first cracked stone. First, let's talk about finding the right stone. Not every rock will work. You need a material that breaks with a clean, conchoidal fracture. Flint, chert, quartzite, and even obsidian are the classic choices. Look for a stone that's uniform in color, free of obvious grain, and has a smooth, glassy surface. A quick hardness test is simple. Try to scratch the surface with a nail. If the stone resists, you've got a good candidate. Always wear gloves and protect your eyes. A stray flake can bite back. Now that you have a suitable piece, we move to shaping the knife with core flaking. Set your work area on a leaf-covered patch of ground or a low wooden platform. Grab a hammerstone, a harder rock like quartz or basalt, and hold the core stone steady. The first goal is to create a platform, a small flat area where you'll strike. Position the hammer at an angle of about 30 degrees and deliver a firm, controlled blow. You'll see a percussion flake pop off, and that's the start of your blade's shape. Next comes spalling, removing larger chunks to give the core a rough knife outline. Keep the strikes consistent, aiming for the edges you want to thin. Each flake you chip away brings the silhouette closer to a functional blade. When you have a thin, tapered edge, switch to pressure flaking for finer control. Use an antler tip or a bone point, press gently along the edge, and watch micro serrations appear. Those tiny flakes sharpen the edge without risking a catastrophic break. What's the most interesting rock you've ever found on a hike? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing your field stories. With the blade taking shape, Irie will soon move on to polishing, testing the edge, and attaching a wooden handle. But first, let's pause here. Feel the weight of the stone in your hand, the rhythm of each strike, and the connection to a lineage that spans millennia. The next steps will turn this raw fragment into a razor-sharp knife ready for the wild. Feel the stone's cool surface against your palm, the grain of the earth that has endured ages, and let that awareness guide each motion as you move toward the final stages. First, we'll smooth the raw edge with a piece of sandstone you can find by the riverbank or in a shallow quarry. Begin with a coarse grit, moving the blade in slow circular strokes. You'll hear the faint rasp as tiny particles are shaved away, and the silhouette of the blade will start to look more refined. The edges becoming less jagged and more defined. Switch to a finer grit once the major imperfections have disappeared. This transition is where the blade begins to whisper its potential. As the stone slides across the stone, watch the sparkle of the freshly exposed surface, a glint that hints at the sharpness to come. Testing the edge can be as simple as slicing through a dry leaf or a piece of thin bark. Hold the blade at a comfortable angle and draw it across the material. If the leaf tears cleanly, you're on the right track. If it merely scratches, a few more gentle pressure flakes will coax the edge into a finer point. Remember, the goal is not to force the stone, but to coax it, letting each microflake fall where it needs to, shaping a blade that feels alive in your hand. When the edge finally bites cleanly, you'll feel a small surge of triumph, a connection to the countless hands that performed the same ritual long before recorded history. Now comes the art of hafting, the marriage of stone to wood that turns a fragment into a functional tool. Look for a small, straight branch that has been naturally fallen, preferably from a hardwood like oak or maple. Strip away any bark with the very knife you have just crafted, revealing the smooth wood beneath. Carve a shallow socket at one end, matching the thickness of the stone's tang. The fit should be snug but not forced. A little wiggle room allows for the binding material to secure the blade firmly. Shape the handle to fit comfortably in your grip. perhaps tapering it slightly toward the base so it rests naturally in the palm. Once the socket is ready, insert the stone, on ensuring the edge aligns with the direction of your intended cuts. Binding the blade to the handle can be achieved with rawhide strips, sinew, or even strong plant fibers. Soak a strip of rawhide in water until it becomes pliable, then wrap it tightly around the junction of stone and wood, crossing over the socket multiple times to create a tight braid. As the hide dries, it will contract, pulling the stone firmly into the socket and sealing the connection. Finish the knot with a simple overhand loop, pulling the ends tight and trimming any excess. The result is a primitive knife that feels balanced, its weight centered where the stone meets the wood, ready to slice, carve, and harvest. With the knife now complete, let's shift our focus to the second tool of the day. A bone needle, when a slender instrument that allowed ancient peoples to stitch skins, garments, and shelter together. The process begins with selecting a suitable piece of bone, ideally from a larger animal such as a deer or a bird with a sturdy shaft. Look for a long, straight segment that is free of cracks and has a relatively uniform thickness. If you find a rib or a leg bone, you can cut a section off with the knife you just made, taking care to keep the cut clean. Once you have your bone fragment, you'll need to shape it into a slender rod. Hold the bone piece against the knife's edge and gently scrape away excess material, working from the broader end toward the tip. The goal is to create a uniform taper, gradually narrowing the rod until it resembles a thin stick, perhaps the width of a finger. Patience is key here. Now, each pass of the knife removes only a thin layer, but over time the shape will emerge. As the rod becomes more refined, you'll notice the bone's natural grain guiding the direction of the flake removal, a subtle reminder that even in its simplicity, the material has its own voice. Now comes the delicate task of forming the eye, the tiny hole through which thread will pass. Traditionally, ancient craftsmen used a sharp stone point or a heated metal tip to pierce the bone, but we can achieve the same result with a fine pointed antler tip or the very tip of our stone knife. Applied with steady pressure, position the tip near the tip of the rod, angling it just enough to begin a small indentation. Rotate the bone gently, allowing the pressure to concentrate on a single point until a minute opening forms. This process can take several careful attempts. If the hole becomes too large, you can smooth the edges with a piece of rough stone, ensuring the aperture remains just big enough for a natural fiber thread. Once the eye is formed, test it by threading a strand of plant fiber or raw sinew through the opening. The thread should glide smoothly, but not so loosely that it slips out. If needed, use the knife's edge to gently widen the opening by a fraction, always checking the fit as you go. When the thread holds securely, you have a functional needle ready for stitching. To demonstrate its use, we'll take a piece of animal hide, fold it over, and run the thread through the eye, pulling it taut and making a simple running stitch. Each pass of the needle pulls the edges together, creating a seam that mirrors the ancient techniques that bound together shelter, clothing, and tools. As we work through these steps, think about the rhythm of the process, the repetitive motions, the focus required, the subtle feedback each material gives you. This is not just a craft, it is a meditation on survival, a tangible link to the people who roamed the same forests and valleys thousands of years before us. When you finish the needle, hold it up to the light and admire its slender elegance, a testament to human ingenuity distilled into a single, tiny instrument. Now that both tools are complete, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've achieved. In less than 10 minutes of focused effort, we have turned raw stone and bone into a working knife and a needle, each capable of performing essential tasks in a wilderness setting. And this transformation underscores a simple truth. With observation, patience, and respect for natural materials, we can recreate the technologies that sustained our ancestors for millennia. Imagine the satisfaction of carving a piece of wood, preparing a meal, or mending a garment using only the tools you fashioned with your own hands. That feeling of empowerment is what Untamed Heritage strives to bring to every viewer. If you've followed along and managed to create your own knife or needle, I'd love to hear how the process felt for you. Did you encounter a surprising challenge, or perhaps a moment of unexpected ease? Share your stories in the comments, and let's build a community of modern-day flint knappers and bone workers. If you're just starting out, feel free to ask any questions about the steps, the materials, or safety tips. I'm here to help you refine your technique. And for those of you who are enjoying this journey into primitive technology, consider giving this video a thumbs up. Your feedback lets the algorithm know that this kind of content resonates with you, and it helps bring more hands-on tutorials to the channel. If you haven't already, you might want to subscribe, not because it's a forced request, but because staying connected means you'll be the first to see new explorations of ancient crafts, from fire making to shelter building and beyond. Every new subscriber adds another voice to the conversation, enriching our collective understanding of how we can live more harmoniously with the natural world. Before we wrap up, let's quickly recap the key takeaways. First, selecting the right stone is fundamental. Look for a uniform, glassy surface that resists scratching. Second, core flaking and pressure flaking work together to shape a sharp edge, with each strike guided by angle and force. Third, polishing with progressively finer grit reveals the blade's true potential, while a well-crafted wooden handle and secure binding complete the knife. Fourth, crafting a bone needle involves careful tapering, precise eye formation, and testing with natural thread. And finally, the entire process is a reminder that the tools we often take for granted have deep roots in human history, and that we can still learn to make them with our own hands. Take a moment now to admire the tools you've created, feeling the weight of the stone in your hand and the smoothness of the bone needle's tip. Let that tactile experience anchor you to the past, reminding you that the skills of survival are not lost, but waiting to be rediscovered. Whether you plan to use these tools on a future hike, a survival workshop, or simply as a tangible connection to our shared heritage, you now possess a piece of the ancient world forged by your own effort. Thank you for joining me on this hands-on adventure. Keep experimenting, stay curious,